Hello everyone, I hope you're taking it easy and your day has been great thus far. For this video we'll be continuing through our retrospective unbagging with issue 57 of Imperium. And Imperium's for the Warhammer 40,000 game setting. And when did this release? For Australia anyway. Sometime, I think it was around this time back in 2023. So it's about 3 years old. Even older if you go back to the US and the UK. Anyway, getting straight into it, front of the issue, number 57 here. So we have a nice image here of Saint Celestin, which is very cool. And no doubt we will have some information about the saint herself. As for this particular issue, it has gone back to a model-centric issue. So we'll get another Necron Tombblade. So this should be the second Tombblade, I believe. Build and paint guide and some information regarding how to choose your army list. Now I'm pretty sure this is the second Tombblade. I was supposed to check, but it slipped my mind. So for this particular issue, there's a lot of lore information here to go through. So there'll be Celestin, the war zone, Sethosa, some information about the Death Watch, some more information about non-militant orders, and there will be a foldout for war zone Electia. And then from the construction side of things, Tombblade, and from the paint side, the Tombblade, as well as Necron warriors, and then lastly forcing a breach as the mission playthrough, etc. So Celestin, the living saint. So some story blurb here. So background information about Celestin, which I usually don't read through in these particular videos, but hey, if anyone actually wants me to read some of these blurbs, feel free to leave a comment. And then just more information, I guess, about her rebirth, her divinity, and things like that. So just some more lore information for Celestin, which I'm sure if you were to grab a Sisters of Battle Codex, there'll be more there. Sethosa, so here is a particular war zone front, so information about that. Some of the different Space Marines stationed there, so the Fire Lords and the Mantis Warriors. We've got a particular planet here, what is it, Hediarth, maybe? Hediarth? Pronunciation. Anyway, Death Watch. So information about the Death Watch. I don't want to call it a chapter per se, because they're not a chapter per se, but they are very cool. So we've got some information about the Death Watch, the Death Watch icon, some of the various weapons of the Death Watch, given that they're part of the Ordo Xenos. So the Xenophase sword, which I believe is derived from Necron technology, a Death Watch frag cannon, and some of the specialist ammunition, which I remember a period of time there were actual some rules for the different ammunition used by Death Watch Marines. I don't know if that's still the case, but who knows. Brotherhood of Specialists, just some more information about the Death Watch, and the typical Death Watch battle cry, suffer not the alien to live. More information about non-militant orders. So these are Adepta Sororitas support orders. So we have the Orders Hospitaller, the Orders Dialogus, the Orders Famulos, and the Orders Pronatus. These two I'm not too familiar with. Well, definitely not this last one. The first one I think I've heard it a few times. I'm obviously familiar with these two from back in the day. Anyway, how to build the Necron Tombblade. I'm pretty sure this is the second one that has come through the Imperium issues. So obviously putting that all together. It is one of those models that it is pretty much a put everything together and hope for the best. There's not a lot of sub-assembly here and there, I guess just because of how the pilot sits within the... I'm actually not too sure what to call it. Anyway, how to paint the Tomb Blade. So starting with a Rune Lord brass base, with Abaddon Black being featured in a number of different places. Of course, Lead Belcher will come into play with a little bit of Corax White just to undercoat some various areas that will probably be green later on. Canoptic Alloy, followed by the Cryptek Armor Shade Gloss, as well as Noon Oil and Reichland Flesh Shade. So definitely a multitude of these different shades and washes coming through to enhance some of the detailing. So this section is basically telling you how to go back and update the Tomb Blade from issue 36. So yes, this is the second Tomb Blade from some of the paints that have been provided after issue 36. So Dawnstone, Stormhost Silver, Administratum Grey were paints that have been provided after the fact. So basically you can go through and do those, as well as do that on the second Tomb Blade part of this issue, which is funny, that was about 20 odd issues ago. Going back to the Necron Warriors, and once again just retrospectively using some of these paints from within the last two dozen odd issues, and just going back and touching up some of those Necron Warriors from some of the very earlier issues within Imperium. So that's very cool. And then we do have a nice little gallery here of some of these touched up Necron Warriors and the Tomb Blades. So definitely getting closer and closer to being parade ready, but you can still see where there are some things missing, particularly where you still see the Corax White. Forcing a breach, Necrons and the Imperium in the way of the Adepta Sororitas. So the breakdown of the Necron units, Necron HQ, mission objectives, and then your opponent's army, which we'll see in a minute. So you have some options for your HQ, and then an army list 1 or 2 variation. Likewise with the Imperium, so you have a breakdown of HQ options, which is pretty much everything that's been provided through Imperium thus far, and then whether you go with list 1 or list 2. List 2 seems to be more ad mech centric with Space Marine support, whilst Army List 1 is probably more Sororitas based with some additional support from the Marines. Breach the Walls is the mission, and then you have pretty much the mission briefing, the forces, battlefield, objectives, etc. And in fact, what does it say here? Use the mats from issue 4 and 38. So the back of both of those issues. So you'll get a 44 by 30 inch total mat size. So that's very cool. Typical splash page for Imperium, followed by the usual coming soon preview. So issue 58, as we know, will have another Necron unit in the way of a second Wraith. And then issues 59 and 60, so now we're getting into that 60s range, we'll introduce a Outrider squad for the Marines. So we'll get 3 of them, but obviously it will take the 2 issues to put the full squad together, which I think is very cool. For those Outriders, I will probably automatically send them straight to Ravenwing, because why not? So that was the actual issue, number 57. Some of the other inclusions, as we noticed in the contents, there is this fold out for Electia. So we just start folding it out. So some of that lore information there, more information about the Sororitas, the Penitent, the actual Sisters of Battle, the actual Necrons, so the Royal Court and the Triarch Stalker, and some more information there, and then the actual war zone itself, and then featuring some different, I was going to say war zones, but actual areas of interest within the actual war zone itself. So that's very cool if you want to have that thematic theming to the war zone. So that is that nice little fold out, which will obviously go straight into the folder at some point in time. Now, as we know, we do get a Tomb Blade, so we get the flying base stand, so we obviously get the base and the relevant stand both in clear plastic. And then lastly, the actual sprue for the Tomb Blade, which we have seen before. So that's the front, that's the side. I cannot remember if it's got the option for switch out and weapons. I think it does. And just because we can, this was printed back in 2011. So the Tomb Blade is, what, 15 years old, give or take? Yeah, 15. Doesn't look a bad kit at all for 15 years. I mean, there have been other kits that have aged much more poorly within 15 years, but overall it's definitely not too bad looking. I don't know how practical the actual unit is. I've not looked in too much into the Necron stuff, but there we go. Necron Tomb Blade sprue for days. So, now that we've done that, there's Imperium, there's the sprue. So that pretty much brings us to the end of the retrospective page through of issue 57 of Imperium. Only a few more issues left of the 50s range before we delve into the 60s. And by the time we hit issue 60, there will only be about 30 issues left of Imperium before this entire retrospective series is pretty much done and dusted. Thank you very much for watching this page through video. Feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. All of this does help support the channel and I do appreciate it. Feel free to check out my Instagram and the YouTube community tab. It's pretty much active work in progress stuff, which at this point in time is definitely Warhammer themed. Here's a hint, it's pretty much the Space Marines from the Armageddon box set, just putting them together. But yeah, obviously the work in progress stuff is a good indication of what I'm trying to work on at the time. With that being said, stay safe and take care, and I'll catch you all in a future video, which may be issue 58 of Imperium, or something else on the channel. See ya.